Good morning and welcome back to Auntie Tay's YouTube channel. I am pretty stoked about today's tutorial. Today we're going to learn how to make our own silicone molds. And I absolutely love to resin, and I prefer using molds when I resin. And being able to make your own mold is such a game changer with the amount of creativity you can come up with. Really, the opportunities are endless when you can make your own molds. So let's go figure out how to do it ourselves. Hey everyone, it's Sam from the Auntie Tay team, and you're watching The Sam Show. Let's go make some fun things. If you have a silicone mat that you love to work on, roll it up and put it away. Silicone sticks to silicone, and I have found out the hard way that you will ruin it. Now I have all of these super amazing acrylic blanks that I got from Stephanie from OG Mama Creates, formerly known as Crafty Stephanie, and they all have a protective backing on them that we'll have to take off, but you can see it's shiny. And this blank I got from Things Katie Makes. It's a Mickey ear, a Cruella Mickey ear, and you can see that the one side is shiny and the other side is matte. Whatever you are molding, the silicone will pick up that texture. So if it's shiny, you'll have a smooth mold with a shiny finish with resin. If it's not, then you are going to have a matte finish on your projects. So just so you know, when you're ordering things, I like shiny, clear acrylic to use the most, or just any smooth acrylic. So now I'm going to take off all of the front and back protective backing on all of them. And then I like to use the Auramask 813 stencil vinyl from Shop Auntie Tay. And one of the things I found for housing is this Let's Resin kit. I absolutely love this for making my own molds. If you don't have the Let's Resin kit, you can always use an old plastic container with some hot glue. You can get really creative with the housing because not a lot sticks to silicone, so any type of plastic or even like a cereal box people use. Now, I really like the Let's Resin housing because you can customize it to the size you want. You can get it on Amazon. I actually have two because I love it so much and I wanted a little bit bigger size, but it tells you exactly how to use it. The only difference is I don't use the double-sided tape because I like to use the stencil vinyl to hold the acrylic pieces down. So when you're mapping everything out, it depends on how much you want to mold, but when you are getting into silicone mold making, you want to start out smaller and then work your way up. Silicone is really expensive and it's really easy to mess up a mold. So practice small and then get bigger as you get a little bit more confident. So put together it to the size you want. This is just a traditional square size, and I like to then map out where I'm going to put all of my acrylic blanks. I don't always go with it exactly, but it just kind of gives you an idea of how much you're going to fit in there. One thing you want to keep in mind is you do want to keep at least a 1/4 of an inch in between pieces. If you get too close, the wall will be too thin and you risk ripping it when you make resin pieces. You have an idea of what you want, then you're going to cut the stencil vinyl wider than what the actual housing is. this is just to keep it from leaking out underneath. And then I always do have a hot glue gun on standby just in case when I pour the silicone it leaks underneath. When you use the stencil vinyl most of the time with the Let's Resin housing, it won't leak, but every now and then silicone is known to get in the tiniest little crevices and leak out. So all you do if that happens is get a little bit of hot glue and kind of build like a dam so it can't get out. You're going to want to make sure that your stencil vinyl is flat and there aren't any wrinkles in it, because if there are, it'll show up in your mold. And you're just going to push it flat down and get it to stick on there really well. Now, because the littlest amount of dust will show up, I clean off my blanks while I put them in the housing. If you want to wear gloves for this so you don't get your fingerprints on it, that's also a really good idea. And so I just put it in, trying to hold them only on the sides, and then when I push down using the coffee filter so that I don't leave any prints on the acrylic, because it will show up in the mold. Another thing you can do instead of putting them in afterwards is you can wait to put the housing in and just, draw on a piece of paper underneath the stencil vinyl to see how much room you have, because you do want to be really careful when you're putting them in. And if you drop them and get some in a weird spot, then sometimes you're not going to be able to get it out and you'll have to start over. So fit as much in as you want. I have all of these little fun candy pieces and food inspired Mickey treats and Disney treats. And so I'm just trying to fill in all the little spaces as much as possible, but fill it as much as you want. Then, as you can see, I'm taking the coffee filter and pushing all of them down. I really like using the stencil vinyl to hold the acrylic pieces down because it has a better quality finish on your overall mold, which I'll show you later on. Now, the type of silicone makes a big difference. The best quality you can use is the Mold Star 15, but I really like all of the silicones from Counterculture DIY, and Let's Resin also has one of their own silicones, and I really like those as well, especially because you can use it with UV resin because they are clear. The Mold Star ones are the turquoise colored molds that you see a lot of the popular molds are made out of. Silicone is measured by weight, at least the brands I use. So I got my scale out and I am going to put it in grams just because that is the smallest increments I can get in. When pouring, you just want to be really careful. I keep baby wipes nearby if I spill anything, but I mix them directly in the same container. If you don't feel comfortable getting an accurate measurement, you can always put them in their own containers before you mix them. And then you can keep it clear, and if I used UV resin more in molds, I would keep it clear, but I typically use epoxy resin and it doesn't matter. So I like to add mica powder to my silicone molds. It helps me know how well I mixed it, so I'm not getting any part that's uncured. You're also not going to want to use any silicone, stir sticks or containers because you're silicone you're mixing will stick to your silicone container. So I'm just using a Dollar Tree mixing cup and then a reusable popsicle stick. And the video is sped up, but you're going to want to mix it kind of the same speed that you mix epoxy resin. You're going to want to try to avoid as many bubbles as possible. Try not to take your stir stick out of the container, but also make sure you clean it on the side and get it completely mixed. And then the best way to pour silicone is very slow and from high up. This will help a lot with bubbles. And you can see I'm scraping the edges of the bowl and scraping off the stir stick. You want to prevent bubbles, and this makes bubbles, but you also want to make sure it's completely mixed because silicone uncured is really not fun. It's a horrible consistency and a pain to clean. So you can see from pretty high up, I am pouring it, and I'm pouring it very thin. And I haven't quite mastered if there's much of a difference on, moving it around or keeping it in the same area, but I typically don't move it around too much. I try to let the silicone go into the corners itself. And depending on how thick you want your mold will make a difference on how much you mixed for it. You can always add more on if you didn't mix enough. As long as you have probably 1/4 of an inch of thickness on the bottom, it should be fine. I prefer to have them a little bit thicker. I feel like thicker molds tend to be a little bit better quality, but that's my personal preference. And here is another mold that I made. I just kind of wanted to show you. This one has a lot more little pieces and little holes. So watching for air bubbles is a big issue. And I just kind of wanted to show you from a top view what it kind of looked like me putting the silicone in. And the type of silicone you use makes a big difference. Fast curing silicone is great, but not for detailed things. Slower curing silicone allows the bubbles to go to the top, thus allowing you to not have as many bubbles in your mold. I have heard the trick that if you put your mold or your mold that you're making into the refrigerator, it will slow the curing. I have not tried this. I prefer not to move it once it's on my table. I prefer to let it just sit, but if that's something you want to try, go for it. And you might have saw it when I was making the other mold, but once you have everything poured, you're gonna then tap on the mold. That, like, the vibrations will help the bubbles get to the top. And with this mold, I was really worried about bubbles because there were so many little detailed pieces, and bubbles really like to get trapped in little holes in those details. And I actually like to use the pointy end of the Auntie bling tool to try to help get into those little areas to help get rid of bubbles and to pull them up to the surface. And you can see I'm just tapping a lot. Then you're just going to let it sit for whatever your silicone says. Mine is 4 to 5 hours for when you can demold your pieces, and then it's 48 hours before you can actually use it, but just follow the directions on your silicone. And then the moment of truth, you get to undo the clamps and see how your molds turned out. You do want to be careful when you're demolding it to not pull on it. You can stretch your mold and it can mess up the face of it. So just peel off the transfer tape. Sometimes it's nice because the blanks will just stick to that and pull out. And you can see how well these ones turned out. The details showed up really well. And just go slow demolding everything. You don't need to rush it, but just slowly pop them all out. It is kind of hard with the clear ones, especially with really small pieces, to see if you got them all. That's where if you just use a colored acrylic, it's a little more helpful. And then my favorite way to clean up your mold and really get it looking nice is using a cuticle trimmer. And there'll be parts where the silicone gets underneath the housing, and then also on the back side of the mold where the silicone kind of goes up the edge of the housing. You'll want to trim that because your mold will lay flatter if you do. Also, if you have any of your pieces that had silicone get underneath where your blank was, like the acrylic piece, you'll want to clean that up as best as you can without damaging the actual part that was molded. I did want to show you how on this mold I had to use an X-Acto knife because it was two pieces glued together and the one layer didn't cover the other one as much, so I had to cut it out. And then this one really can show how if the piece isn't glued all the way down, how the silicone can get underneath it and it just messes with the finish of your mold. Now you can still pour epoxy in it and it'll be fine, but it will start pulling at it over time and this could damage it. Or you can spend extra time trying to clean it up, which is pretty meticulous. See, you can see the small little pieces that are stuck on it. The one was definitely glued on better than the other one, but that's how it turned out. Some of the little pieces did still have bubbles in them. I wasn't too worried about it, but I was actually really happy with how well it did turn out, because sometimes that's just really hard when you have little holes in pieces like that. So the more you practice, the better you'll get at. And then you can see the edge that I'm talking about on the back side that you want to trim. That's what it looks like afterwards. It just gets rid of that little lip. Okay, and my favorite part is let your silicone cure in your mixing cup and then just peel it all out. Oh my gosh, that's so satisfying. And then you can actually keep that cured silicone. You can blend it up and then mix it into later molds, because silicone is really expensive, but it's super easy to clean up if you mix it all correctly. And that's it. Here's some of the projects that I made with the molds that we made together. I love being able to make my own Mickey ears, and I can customize the colors with all my favorite colors of glitter. I just think it's so much fun. And then I can make keychains and hair accessories and all the things with these molds. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope this inspires you to make your own molds. See, I made some hair clips, so much fun. The possibilities are endless. Thanks for watching, guys.